make it there and can make it back.
Salutations and shit, folks. Welcome back to another episode of your favorite travel podcast, Travel and Shit, where I, your host, D. Carey, have an experiential conversation about the nuanced ways that travel intersects with regular life. And getting straight to the point, beautiful people, we've got a beautiful guest. My guest, welcome, and thank you so very much for joining me today. Please introduce yourself.
Hello. My name is Sojourner. Yes, it means traveler. So this is very, very fitting. I'm a remote social work by passion and a digital storyteller. Actually, I'm sorry. That's the other way around. I'm a remote social work by profession. That's what pays me. Okay. So I can travel and a digital storyteller by passion. And I run a platform called Sojourneys, where I help 9-to-5ers find freedom and flexibility outside the office, check off their career and bucket list dreams at the same time. Because I have too many student loans to be quitting my job to travel the world right now. So I gotta keep working, but still gonna make time for traveling.
So what, pray tell, was the impetus to you saying that you wanted to not be location dependent?
I think it really did start when I studied abroad in 2015. I studied Spanish in undergrad, and I almost got a D in the Spanish class. And so I was like, well, I need to go abroad because I've been learning Spanish since I was 11. I was 20 at the time, so I decided I need to just go abroad because I'm tired of reading like 19th century literature and I want to speak it. And so I think that experience of being gone for a semester, one, just introduced me to traveling abroad. I had never been out the country before then, but also two, I was like, how do people do this? Like, what are the different ways? So I got really curious about all the different career paths, and then eventually remote work kind of snuck its way in there. And so I've been working remotely as a social worker since I graduated in May 2020. I started my job that I still have in June 2020.
Okay. So question for you. Before I get into like your early experience of travel, I mentioned to you earlier, selfish reasons. Hey, bestie, she's a social worker. So how did you become a remote social worker? Like, what is it? Because my understanding, I guess this will be for clarity's sake, and this will also help. This is why I asked, right? For those of you that I think in the same thought process. My understanding of a social worker is, one, you've got the person that when something goes wrong with the kids, this is the person that they call. You assess the situation, you meet with the families, and you kind of gauge what is the safest and the best resolution for all the parties involved. Also, when I think of a social worker, I think of a social worker as the person that goes to somebody's house and checks in with them and makes sure that they are not conforming to, but like adhering to all of like the court directives that may be in case with any type of legal issues. Because honestly, I don't think, could be wrong, I don't think that you have a social worker unless one is like given to you. Other than that, the next thing that I'm thinking that like is, I don't know if congruous is the word, but is like kind of like in alignment with what a social worker would be, to me, is like the therapist that isn't like a psychologist or a psychiatrist. Like, I feel like, do social workers also sometimes do like mental health work?
Yeah, they definitely do. Like, I was in grad school, so I don't have a bachelor's in social work. I studied psychology and Spanish. So I came from psychology, thought I was going to be a school psychologist, didn't like testing kids. So that wasn't going to happen. Also wasn't a career that I thought I could travel with for real, if I wanted to do that. I stumbled upon international social work, another field, had no idea existed, didn't know what it was, and found this program. And through that program, I was exposed actually to macro social work. So what you're describing is micro social work, which is the most traditional form that most people think of. CPS, working with kids, foster care, etc.
Right.
But there's also meso and macro social work where we don't work directly, like individually with clients. So there's other forms of social work where we work at the organizational or institutional level. So I'm actually a remote social worker, right? That's my background, but I'm a research and evaluation consultant. So I work at an organization of Black women where we are hired to do program evaluations, strategic planning, and we're primarily qualitative. So we're also non-traditional in the sense of we don't really do stats. Like I send out surveys and I create surveys, but really it's about focus groups, talking to people. And because we're a predominantly Black organization, like very Black space, people reach out to us to want to know how they're serving their Black clients, right? Their Black community, like in the area. And so with that, we always tell them there's so many things that we cannot grasp from a survey. Like there are some, like the questions you're asking, you cannot grasp from a survey. So that's why we do the focus groups and interviews and workshops and stuff like that. So I work more at the macro, non-traditional form of social work, which is funny to me because most of my friends who I went to grad school with are in this macro space. So I don't have many friends who are actually therapists. So social work is changing, and I love being able to tell people that, hey, I'm a social worker who does not work with kids at all, love the kids, support the kids, wasn't my ministry, but I'm able to do different kinds of youth work, working with adults, working with organizations here as a macro social worker. So my title is officially like an evaluation strategist, but I'd also do a lot of project management, but I say I'm a remote social worker because that's still what I do. And those skills I got actually from grad school. I happened to have a remote internship because for international work, I was in school in St. Louis, but the company was in Berlin technically. So I worked with like the German team. So through that experience, I got that remote social work experience before I even knew it was a thing I could do full time. I thought it was just like an internship situation. Come to find out, it actually exists out here in the 9-to-5 world.
Holy fuck. Go figure. I got a whole degree in shit I ain't using, and I mean, you know, could have been got it a little bit better. So, but international social work, is that more just being aware of international differences that you would have to come across in social work, like focusing more cultural differences? No, I don't know. Yeah,
essentially. So you still get a master's in social work. I went to the Brown School at Washington University in St. Louis for it. And it's a mouthful of a school, but that's where I went to school. And my concentration was international development. So at school, at the Brown School, you pick a concentration. And that was the one that I chose because I had lived abroad by that time. I had done Fulbright, and I also did AmeriCorps back home in Milwaukee. And I was looking for a program that kind of gave me the best of both worlds. Like I could talk about race and all that kind of stuff, but I also wanted that international focus. And so this program kind of blended both of them together. So I studied international development for my concentration and then social entrepreneurship for my specialization. And that's really how I got into this whole space and learned about social impact and all these areas where social workers could work in that, similar to you, I had no idea was actually a space for us. But essentially, yeah, it like international development teaches you about how primarily white folks took the way they treated Black people and put it across the world, essentially. And so it's a controversial field. I will say that I had a lot of moral and ethical concerns and questions, still do, about the field itself. And my initial plan actually was to work on the educational side. So work for study abroad programs. So I can help prepare and teach students like myself in 2015 who are going abroad about all the external issues that we're just not aware of living in the U.S. for real. And that was going to be my role. But the pandemic hit in March 2020. So all those jobs I was applying for disappeared. And that's how I actually ended up in remote work.
So I'd just like to say I feel cheated. I mean, what a world. Yeah. What a world. So I went to college quite some time ago. Those not even options. I don't even know exactly how to package the sentiment, to verbalize the sentiment, where it's like, on the one hand, I am, and this is totally not even travel related, we'll get there, but on the one hand, it's like, wow, that's fucking incredible, right? But then two, I think more so what the difference that I'm seeing is just the awareness that non-traditional paths to higher education or just education in general exists. Like, I went to college in 2003. So when I went, like, the most exotic there was like international business, or, and mind you, I know that that's not the case, but I'm saying of my college experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
When I went into it, it was kind of like, okay, like public relations, that's going to be like the little bit of this and a little bit of that. And you'll be able to talk to people and you'll do business, but you're not really just doing business. You get to be out and about. And that's where I thought I wanted to be in the show. And I had the briefcase and the whole shebang. But I am just so happy that there are, and I think also it could have just been like the schools that I was looking at. In fairness, is that I was looking at, I just wanted to get out. I knew that before I went in. So I didn't necessarily go into it. So I know this is one episode that I'm gonna definitely have some of my little cousins listen to, just to have that awareness. Because it's one thing for me to say it, but since I went so long ago, it's like for them to be like, mm-hmm. And then be back on their little phones. Totally get it, babies. I understand. But thank you for that, because that just, I'm gonna go on my own rabbit hole and like ticky tacky and Google all of that. But I feel like there are so many, especially because social work is one of those fields, to my understanding. Again, I'm nobody's social worker, not what my degree was in, but my mother got her degree in social work. My mother was a social worker for quite some time before she started doing a bunch of other things. And one of the things that I know we've definitely discussed is the burnout. And that's another thing I've been discussing with my best friend, is that it's just one of those really draining and demanding and emotionally taxing jobs that people get so burnt out so quickly dealing with everybody else's problems. It's like you have your own on top of all of that. And I can see how dealing with that in that type of environment may also want you to, or not want you, but kind of have you lean towards wanting to change things, shake things up, and just kind of not be, I don't want to say complacent, but for those of us that don't work in traditionally stressful environments, it's one thing to be like, okay, yeah, I hate my job, right? But then it's a different thing when the nature of your work is very emotionally taxing, on top of being someone that is at different intersections and marginalized groups of life. So I can envision that people that are working in industries such as yourself, like social work and other high stress industries, that they would specifically be more inclined to want to leave the country for a myriad of reasons, but especially since you're hit on both ends, right? Like you don't have like that, oof, at least I'm at work, let me just dive into my work, something that I enjoyed. Not to say that you enjoyed or not, but you can't just dive into your work to escape the things that may be bothering you in regular life. So with all of that in mind, how did you decide that for professional reasons and outside of just like personal reasons and wanting to travel, that the two were actually going to be the best option for you?
That's a great question. I think part of it is just the family I was born into. Like my mom is really into community work. Like she's a minister by like profession, but she runs a 2-acre urban farm here in Milwaukee. Yeah, and like she runs a community center. She has a co-op where she sells her herbal body products along with other Black, brown, and white entrepreneurs in a space. And then like my dad was a history teacher for 30 years. And then my stepdad, and then my stepdad also did a lot of community and like workforce development work. So I think just being in that family, like that's what I saw growing up. So that is just something I always knew I wanted. Did I think I would be a social worker? No. Being a social worker was really just finding this program that seemed to blend all the things that I love together. Truly, I'm someone who follows like my passion. Like I didn't have a dream career. Like I knew I wanted to travel, right? I knew I wanted to continue to explore and just learn about the world. But it's really hard to find a career path that allows you to do that in a sustainable way. And also a career path where I think I was drawn to social work because of the community aspect. I think that was the one thing I learned about being abroad, was like community is everything. And so being involved in the community was really important, and just seemed like a pathway to blend all of my interests in one, so that no matter what I did, I would be quote unquote qualified, or, you know, whatever you want to call it, really. And so that's how I ended up in social work. I thought I applied to like anthropology master's degrees international education. Like, I did all the things they tell you not to do when you're applying to grad school. But that's because I saw myself in each of these professions. So I was like, okay, which one is really gonna like call my name? And funny you mentioned international business. I had a friend of a friend who's actually recommended this program to me, but I only knew about it because I saw her on Instagram traveling in her grad program. I'm like, girl, what are you doing? Like, wait, what is this? And she's like, well, since you're in AmeriCorps, check out this international social work program. And that's how I found it. So I guess that's like a nod to representation on multiple levels of seeing Black people doing things they love, from my parents to that friend of a friend, and then doing my own research to figure out what path made the most sense for me. And ironically, I use my degree, even though I'm not working abroad. A lot of the project we consult on may involve international populations, or a research class I did that I didn't think I was going to use pops up, or when I wrote proposals for an internship, I do that now. So even though it seems like a very zigzaggy career path, for me, it actually makes so much sense in the most beautiful way.
I love that for you. I love people that actually enjoy, or at least find joy, because the two are not, they're not the same. I enjoy coming across people that do enjoy or find joy in what it is they do. So I truly, it's like, you know, people say, oh, I love that for you. And then you can kind of feel like, bitch, you don't mean that. No, I do. I love this for you. I love this for all of y'all that actually like your shit. But I do enjoy this for you. So I'm pleased to hear that. Now, what was you said you didn't leave the country until the undergrad travel abroad experience. Yeah. What was your relationship with travel before that? Like you said that you saw your parents engaged in the community. What was your view of travel? You had an idea of community, but what was it of travel?
Right. So for traveling, I'm born and raised in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Midwest girl through and through. But neither of my parents are from Milwaukee. So my mom is from Pittsburgh. My dad is from St. Louis, and my stepdad's family came up through the Great Migration from the South, Louisiana. So we were always on the road. So before I even really got on planes, because we did take plane trips occasionally, but I have 7 siblings. And at the time, I think 5 of us were like around very frequently. So we did a lot of road trips. So I would go Milwaukee to St. Louis, which is like 6 hours. Milwaukee to Pittsburgh, which is 12 hours. Milwaukee to Bastrop, Louisiana, which is like 18 hours. Milwaukee to New Orleans. Like, so we were always on the road for like Thanksgiving or a summer vacation. We would go like to Wisconsin Dells, which is really popular up here. My mom was really big on us having like a summer trip, or like spring break. We went to Arizona to see the Grand Canyon. So I think it's funny because a lot of Black folks travel due to family, which people say is not a vacation, but for me it was like, that was a vacation. Going to visit my cousins in Atlanta was a vacation. Going to Pittsburgh was a vacation for me. So that's how I got accustomed to being on the road. Also, my name is Sojourner, so mama knew something that I didn't at the time as far as the traveler I have become. But I think also having that name, being named after Sojourner Truth, like knowing that history, knowing how she got her name, that was her free name after she got her freedom out of slavery, went from Isabella to Sojourner, and she traveled and spoke her truth and advocated for women's rights. She's very underrated in Black history and U.S. history, if I do so myself. I'm as a bit biased though.
Women's history as well.
Yeah, and women's history too. Before
women's right to vote.
Yeah. So I think also knowing the history of her name gave me a different perspective of traveling, and like, and that too. But it was really family. Like family, being on the road. I can sleep anywhere at this point. Put me in a car, put me in a train, a bus, put me outside camping. Like I can knock out anywhere because I just got used to it. Okay.
I love stories that start like this. Go on. Go ahead.
So my mom was also really big into summer camps, which is also kind of how I got traveling a bit. Anytime my brothers and I mentioned that we had an interest, she would find a camp for us. Ooh. that summer.
Come on, Mom.
So yeah, no, Mom, I love her. Shout out to Venus. Love her so much. But anytime we had it,
Venus.
yes. Oh, That's her. She's so cute. But anytime we had an interest, like one year I was really into like Project Runway and fashion design. And so she sent me to the University of Wisconsin, Green Bay for like 2 weeks to do like a fashion design camp. So that's how I also got traveling too. But all that to say, I did do some camping in Wisconsin through like 4-H. So it was like a creative kind of camp, and it wasn't like in tents. It was like more in cabins.
Okay.
You know, so that was my introduction to camping, to be honest. I think now, like, I want to go like camping in Botswana. I'm not really a camper, but that sounds cool. Like going to like northern Wisconsin was like, I don't know about that. And this lake water, not put my head underneath there. Yeah. But you know, like the canoeing, all that kind of stuff, I got exposed to when I was younger as well. So my parents did a really good job of like exposing us to different things, which is not the story you often hear about folks from the Midwest, let alone Black folks, let alone from Milwaukee. So I'm really appreciative that they saw value in that and wanted us to kind of spread our wings ourselves.
Yeah, I hope I could be that kind of parent.
Same.
I get, as an adult now, I get the amount of effort, something as simple as just looking up a camp.
Yeah.
Not just like paying for it and then like getting you there, just finding it. You know what I mean? Like even as an adult, finding stuff to do on my travels, finding stuff to do around here. If it takes me too many clicks or too much investigating, I'm over it. And this was like before granted, the internet has been the internet for a while, but things weren't as immediate as they were now. So I'd assume that as children, it was much harder to find things. So shout out to parents. Y'all be doing the real work.
Because mama didn't have like TikTok and
sure
Google
not.
of the 5 best camps for your kids. Like that stuff.
Right. There weren't writers just pumping this out. It wasn't as accessible.
Yeah. So and like I remember my mom having like MapQuest, like printing that out. Like that's like that's what we had.
How lost I've been with MapQuest, baby. I've never had a sense of direction. You hear me? Ever. These GPS, the phones, savior. My personal savior.
I agree. I'm like, I can't read a map, but if I have to choose, I'm gonna whip out that phone in a heartbeat.
I can read a map, but I ain't gonna necessarily read it appropriately. That's the difference. I remember one time I drove to, I think it was Virginia. It was Virginia. I was going to see my cousin Brandy. Hey, babe. I got turned around coming out of the rest stop. I will never forget this. I had on a light blue juicy sweatsuit, and I probably wore them hot pink Crocs.
I was like, come on, juicy sweatsuit. That's an era.
That's probably still in my closet too. I refuse to throw it out. But I got so freaking lost coming out of that McDonald's. I think I went the wrong way on the interstate. I went like north and I should have been going south, which should have been a 6-hour trip. Took me 9 hours, bro. 9 fucking hours. And this was before you could just get on your phone. This is printed paper. You hear me? Printed paper. I was so lost in another person's style. I was so lost. Baby, I done lived. Oh, that was rough. Took me back for a second. Glad to be here now in this moment.
My gosh. No.
So, in terms of your beginning traveling to Spain for undergrad, how did you decide as a college student that was going to be the decision that you would make? When I looked into, and I ask all these questions from like my own personal experience. For me, that's just the easiest way to ask a question, right? So when I was in college, I was always hearing about study abroad, abroad. And the idea of, wow, I could be X, Y, and Z and learn this and what, I don't know what the hell I was thinking study abroad was at the time. But then when it came down to actually filling out the paperwork, I immediately was like, oh, this is too much work, and then dismissed it. What was it for you that you said, nah, this isn't going to be too much? What were your personal feelings that made you say, oh, it's going to be worth the application process? It's going to be worth doing the research or asking questions? Or was it that it wasn't a difficult decision because it was actually, I don't want to say like given to you, but was it facilitated so that it was easy for you to navigate as a student?
Yeah, I think it was a mix of both. So I came into undergrad knowing I wanted to study abroad because in Milwaukee, we actually have like a lot of like language immersion schools. I
Okay.
didn't go to them, but also that's also when a lot of our schools still had a lot of foreign languages. So I started learning Spanish when I was in the 6th grade. So it's been something that I had always wanted to go, but finances, like those little 2-week trips that they try to have
Uh-huh.
are expensive. Like they're like expensive. And so for me,
Big
it was like,
expensive.
yeah. And so it was never something like the timing never worked or like the class fell through, etc. in high school. But I went to like the International Baccalaureate program in high school,
Hmm.
and Spanish was like the language I did. So I was an IB Spanish 1, I think. And the professor or teacher was like, well, when y'all go to college, make sure y'all study abroad because like y'all been learning it, but y'all
Right.
really will be immersed. So it was planted in my mind that I'm gonna study abroad. Now I was like, okay, this almost D got me a little shaky my freshman year, but I still went to the study abroad office because I had heard about this semester program in Granada, Spain. Like everyone who
Okay.
ever went on it had talked about it. I was like, let me go see. You know, we're many of us at my college. I went
Hmm.
to a PWI, so I'm like, let
Same
me
girl.
just go figure it out. And so I went into the office, and the minute they told me I could use my FAFSA to go, that was it. When they said like, oh no, you can go for a semester and that's like
Yeah.
the same price as you would be like here, but you're going abroad. And I went to school in Peoria, Illinois. So it was like, I wouldn't be missing too much in a semester. Not love Peoria, like no shade at all. But like there's only so much you could do at like
Yeah.
a
I
mid-sized
feel you.
PWI. And so it was like, well, if I'm gonna take a semester off, let me go ahead and do it. So that's what I did. And a lot of my professors supported it. Like, I feel like when you study a language, they want you to go. So it was like, why aren't you going if you're going to be a
Okay.
major? So I feel like that additional support was like, let me go ahead and figure it out. The minute I like opened the brochure, and saw like all the smiling faces, and then
Hmm.
I was in Granada, and they have the Moorish castle, the Alhambra. I was like, that's beautiful. Like I was just enamored with everything, which is ironic because I never wanted to go to Spain. I was
Oh,
always told like go to like Mexico or Peru or
okay.
like Central or South America. It
Hmm.
was never like a Spain situation, but that's the only really like solid program my undergrad had. So I'm like, well, I'm gonna go where y'all say I can
Use these
go.
FAFSA dollars, right?
Yeah, yeah. I'm like, and y'all told me I can use FAFSA because they had like the little 2-week interim like J term program. It's like $3,000, and I didn't have that money, but I did have scholarships. Like
Right.
I had that, so I'm like, let me use what I got and just kind of go for 5 months, and that's what I did. My parents were like, okay, they didn't really. I mean, they kind of knew it was gonna happen, so they weren't gonna try
Right.
to argue with me about it. But they were just
Hmm.
like, as long as you do the paperwork, got your ducks in the row. Like I did have like financial support from my parents in undergrad, thankfully. So definitely a privilege to have. They were
Right.
like, if we paid the same tuition, like they were like, well, it's just
I did.
you being in Spain, like it's whatever. I learned later my dad had a bit of hesitation, but my mama, they're like divorced. They've been divorced I was like 2, so it's like
Hmm.
if your mom supports it, like go right ahead. What's the
Right.
situation?
So you did study abroad through not just undergrad, but in postgrad as well?
Yeah, yeah. So part of another reason why I chose my program was because you can do an internship abroad. And
Mm.
I'm a Virgo, which I say that because when I say how much I plan, people always ask me if I'm a Virgo or not.
Okay.
So if you believe in astrology, I do align with that. I'm not like the expert on it, but I'm really big on planning. So for
Okay.
grad school, I knew I was like, okay, you studied abroad at undergrad, that was great. Let's study abroad in grad school too. And that time I had also, in between then, I did my Fulbright in Spain. So I had already lived abroad too for a year
Ooh,
teaching
nice,
English.
nice.
Yeah, so I went back after I studied abroad. So I'd already had that experience. So I knew like whatever program I did, I'm gonna go for a semester, a summer, whatever works. And then this program, I had did my research on the professor. So that's my number one tip. If you're going to grad school, you only got 2 years. It's not 4 years like in undergrad. Like you got 2 years to get it together, to map out what you need to do. And so I kind of had a
Okay.
plan. I had looked at all the professors in the international concentration, see whose research and whose work I had best aligned with. I'm like, this one in Berlin sounds like me. I worked at a social impact like think tank for girls in sport for development. So the founder, Dr. Cameron, she had created like a boxing program in Berlin to help girls learn self-defense. And so then she was at the stage of like taking what she learned and then doing like the research, creating digital guides, etc., on why this is something that should be done. And so that was kind of my role when I did it, which is why I could do it remotely, because I don't need to be in person to compile information, research, communications, etc. And then I went for a summer. So I took her class to learn about refugees and social services in Berlin. And then after the class, I stayed the whole summer. So from May to August 2019, I was essentially in Berlin. And I was working with her, doing 40 hours a week, doing like a 9 to 5 kind of situation, and then going and exploring Berlin and other surrounding cities and stuff after that.
That's again, I love this for you. So, question. Yes. What do you think, if any, were the differences between you doing your undergrad traveling abroad and then your grad school traveling abroad? Maturity aside, right? Like just the types of schooling that they were. Would you say that there were any differences? And if so, what would those be?
Yeah, I think the main difference was because they were in two very different countries. Like Spain and Germany culturally are very different. Like, they have some similarities, like Spain loves wine, Germany loves beer, like, so there are little things like that where you kind of combine similarities, but I think culturally they're very different. So that shaped my experience. I will say that being an undergrad in Spain was like romanticized. Like I was just obsessed with everything, like the tinto, the tapas. Like it was just my first full-on immersion experience. I was enamored with Spain in a way where by the time I had went to Berlin, it was like I had traveled quite a bit, so it was like I got some more experience under my belt. But I think the biggest thing was the difference between studying abroad and like interning / working in a place. Like when you study abroad, the classes were not difficult, because they want you to learn outside the classroom. So I think that was the biggest thing, was the relaxation that I had in Spain. Like in Berlin, it was similar, like, but I was there to work, like I was there to intern, to get a more, a hands-on experience. And so that was different for me, but but aside from that, they were still I still romanticize Berlin too, because it was my first time being in a big international city in Europe. I had where I taught English, that was a smaller town in northern Spain where they don't get many tourists. I was the first Black teacher my students had, so it was a whole different experience too. So having that in between study abroad and interning was also 3 very different levels, but I appreciated every single one of them, learned a lot at every single one of them. But I definitely think being in a big European city like Berlin was amazing. And as well as being in Granada, like a mid-sized, like Spanish city, was just like, this is all new. So it was new for very different reasons. But I think, the biggest thing was I was working. I was working.
You had that one time.
Yeah.
So you had mentioned community and your ideas of community from being young, but how do you, because it's one thing to ask like how to find community abroad, but how do you immerse yourself in existing communities? Because that's one thing I think that gets a little, I won't say like construed, but like maybe just a little forgotten in a lot of the expat conversations, is that the community exists without you. Like the community is not for communities that you create, like, Black expat groups in different places like that. It makes sense that is a little bit different, because that is a community that is designed specifically kind of to bring in new. However, for you to end up being in a different country for the long term, not just a visitor, not just somebody that is, on a tour. So of course your tour guide is smiling and they're welcoming and they're introducing you to other people that are going to smile and welcome for the most part. But what is it like immersing yourself in other people's communities, would you find that there is a different way or a different feel doing that abroad versus home?
Oh, that's another great question. I think building community is difficult wherever you go. Difficult, not in that it's impossible. It's just hard. Like it's hard to build community, even like in your hometown, right? When people move back to their hometowns, like I have. When I was a teenager, being a teenager here in Milwaukee is very different from being a working adult. So I think that's already difficult. But then when you go abroad, because they're so used to people coming and leaving, it's hard to convince them to like be your friend. Like, I just want to like hang out, etc. But for them, it's like, what's the buy-in? Like, because you're gonna be gone in like 4 months. Like, is that really a sustainable friendship if you never come back to Spain? So I think that's really the hardest part. But again, it's not impossible. I was able to meet people while I was abroad. I think working in a place and like being there longer term was helpful. Like study abroad again was just like everything's amazing, and so it was a bit harder to make those connections. I was just so overwhelmed with being there, but like in the best possible way. But I think when building a community, like when I was there for a year, it was difficult. Like I did have roommates though, which was actually really helpful. So I had a Spanish roommate, and her and I are still in contact with each other, like through social media and stuff. So I think that was the strongest community I was able to build, was just with her, like sharing space together and being around. I think if I were to go back and do it again, I would have done more like sports. I'm not a sporty girl. Like I work out, but like I've never been like a sporty girl. But I did like a photography class, and that was really cool. I was able to meet folks through there when I was living abroad. But I think really sports is always noted as like the universal language, because you don't need to actually speak the language, like the language of the country, to know how to play the sport. Because if you know how to play soccer in the U.S., you can probably join a team. Soccer. Like, and so people always say sports is like a universal language. So when you move abroad or you trying to build community, join a sports team or do something athletic, because even if y'all don't speak the same language, y'all speak the physical language of that sport, so then you can pick it up. So I think that's what I would do differently. But joining classes, going to community centers, I became like a regular in different places. So at different cafes, I would go there all the time, and eventually, people are like, oh, well, she comes in here all the time, let me talk to her. That was another way. Me and Spain is known for their pastries. Me and my pastry lady became real good friends, because I would always get the little chocolate pastry. So eventually I learned her name. I think her name was Blanca. And so like her and I would have little conversations. So I think the other part is just reestablishing or relearning what it means to build a community, because it would have been an unrealistic expectation to think I would build the same community abroad that I would have in the US. Like that's just not a realistic expectation given the time frame, given the language barrier. My host mom in Spain, Bernarda, love her too. She was like, your Spanish is getting better, like 2 months in, because that Southern Spanish accent was so different from what I was used to. So it took me more time to understand her. But I think in order to build community, you need to give yourself time. And the way a lot of programs are set up, like either you get the ball rolling the day you get there, or you kind of, it may take a bit longer depending upon who you are. And I feel like when you go abroad for the first time, it can be like, okay, hold on now, let's figure this out first, and then kind of jump into the community building. But there are different ways to go about it. But it's beautiful when it does happen. I will say that when you know that if I was in Spain, I could text my Spanish roommate and be like, hey girl, I think I'm gonna do a little Spanish. Sure, I may stop through, and like it will be a whole reunion. So I don't think it's easy. I don't think it's easy, and I feel like I would have loved to stay in one place for longer. But again, freedom of movement. I just like to move around and not stay in a place too long. So that also kind of hinders community sometimes in building that. But those classes, becoming a regular, getting involved in sports, going like the same bars too when you go abroad. If you like get to know the bartenders like during the week, if you go out during the week and on the weekend and stuff like that too. It's just very different ways to build community. If you're going to Spain, if I were again to go back and do it all over again, I would try to become a bartender, because
Okay.
everyone wants to be friends with the bartender, right?
Right.
So then
Yes,
you
this
have
is
you have
actually
you have to talk to
definitely
me,
true.
right?
Yeah.
So I could have practiced my Spanish and also learned how to make drink. Like it would have been
Yeah.
an interesting way to build community.
Okay.
So
You
I don't know if
tell me.
anybody's listening, still in college, want to study abroad. That's what I would do. That's what I would tell 2015 me was go be a bartender. Go
I like
do
that.
that to kind of get immersed in or like help them promote their bars. You know, be with people outside the club saying, "Hey,
Right.
do you want to come to this bar? We got 2-for-1 drinks." Because then, it
I'll
also
be
forces
there.
you to like learn the language, right?
Yeah.
Because part of building a community is speaking that same language. But if you don't speak the language, it's hard to bridge that gap.
I like those. And I gotta say that those were really great suggestions. Like I never had a remote or long-term experience abroad. So in fairness to me, I've not had reason to think of those things, but really great ideas. I especially like the whole just becoming a regular because I feel like that's the easiest thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you don't necessarily want to put yourself out there, or if you're like pinching pennies or your time is strapped, right? Like same. Never really been a sports girl. I don't like losing. That is my personal reason. So I don't necessarily engage in things that I don't think that I can. I don't engage in competitive things that I don't think that I can win in because I'm not a great loser. Don't think I'm a sore loser. To be clear, I just don't fucking like it, so I don't do it. So I reached out because you had such a bomb thread on Twitter, and the thread essentially was tips and resources to use your school and career opportunities to travel. So we've touched on the school end of it. Would you have any career advice? But we got the babies, we got them in order. Good luck to y'all. I'm sure that anyone will be willing with other resources and ways to help should you have them. But for us grown folks, the post school or the I didn't go to school or the, well, this is where I'm at now. What do you have for us? What are your suggestions?
Yes. So obviously I chose an international career for a reason, right? I figured if it had the word international in front of it, that means I could at some point travel. So there are a lot of different careers. Obviously I've talked about international social work. International business is another big one. International education is another one. Obviously those aren't careers where you may be traveling full time, but if you want some trips here and there, I think looking for any career that has international in front of it is a surefire way to decide to get the opportunity to go abroad. And if you don't do that, I think there are other ways around it. Conferences, everybody, or not everybody, a lot of people have like professional development funds at work, or can say, or it's an easy way to propose to your job, like, hey, there's this conference happening. Can I go to it and then, come back and give a presentation at work about what I learned? There are different ways to kind of get around it. Remote work is all the rave, right? Everyone's talking about remote work. So that is, I think, the best way to quote unquote study abroad as an adult because you get paid. I was broke when I studied abroad. So I think if you have the opportunity to work remotely, take it. That's another great opportunity, though I will say be mindful of time zones when you do that because you still have to work. People always ask me why I don't work from like Thailand. I'm like, because have you seen the time difference?
Yeah.
Like Central and South America are a bit more my speed right now due to the time zone. So I will say that for remote work. Also, even though I did Fulbright after undergrad, international fellowships aren't just limited to like undergrad students. There's a website called ProFellow, which I mentioned in that thread, that if you put in your discipline, what places you want to go to, like all the information, it can show you different fellowships in your career path, right? And I know a lot of people are like, well, I don't want to go for a year. They have like short-term ones, they have long-term ones, and also Fulbright, what I did, you can do as a professional. They have different programs. So don't rule out fellowships because some of them are made for mid-career professionals who maybe are looking for a break, right? Or who want to kind of pivot into a different area. You can do a fellowship to kind of see if that's the area you actually want to go into. So I think ProFellow is one of the most underrated websites, and Dr. Vicky Johnson is the founder of it. I used to write for them for a little side cash when I was in grad school, so I definitely think they're dope people to be connected with. But I would say those are some of my main ways. And then if you want to just, leave your job, there are people who also do like sabbaticals. I don't know if you follow Vicarious, so Stephanie Perry and then Rashida Dow. They're known for like house sitting and all of that. I've seen people do that and just take whole career breaks, like save up money and decide, hey, I'm kind of done with this, and actually do like an adult study abroad and just kind of go on their own and travel. There's also a bunch of different go abroad. I think you need a remote job for a lot of them, but different programs like Sojourn I've heard of, where you can kind of go abroad for a little bit and do like the co-living situation. So, I mean, it takes some creativity. I'm not gonna lie, it takes some creativity. But if you want to totally up in your career, those are different ways you can do it. And then the ways that are a bit more accessible, I think, for 9-to-5ers is looking at your calendar. It's at this time it's January 2023. Seeing when those federal holidays are, tacking on an extra day in the beginning or the end, I think is one of the easiest ways to definitely make it work. I have very generous vacation time in my current job, so I don't have to do as much as I used to, but that was my former hack of like, okay, I have however many weeks to go abroad, but what if I tack on a day before Memorial Day and like a day after to kind of create a long weekend? You may not fly halfway across the world during those time frames, but I think traveling in the US is also really cool. I'm known for my train rides. I've taken the one from Chicago to California. It was 3 days on the train, so it was that's everyone's reaction. It was a whole experience. So there's like the ways to get creative with your travel too. Like if you don't have those extended week-long vacations, just figure out, okay, what days do I have? What PTO do I have? Like, what's your vacation time situation? And trying to figure out how you can tack on days and extend days and use those holidays to your advantage.
I'm a big fan of that. I just took the week before Martin Luther King Day off. One, because at my job, January is the easiest month for me to get time off. So I always take a week in January. And more often than not, I will take that week before or the week of, for that very reason. I don't give me the extra day, because at least this way you can come back on a Sunday. We love a good road trip over here. We have done, I don't even know how many road trips we've done. We've done a lot. I don't fucking know. But for those of you on the East Coast, I've got a handy digital download for you. 5 different cities, 5 different vibes. You choose. I'm gonna put a link to that in there. Because to your point, like, you don't have to do big travel to travel, right? You don't have to do international travel, or you don't have to do extended travel. Like, you don't have to do 2 weeks in a destination to be able to appreciate a destination. I'll say one of the places that we went for, like, I think the quickest trip that we've taken was, we went to Portland, Maine. We ended up having just some flight dollars that needed to be spent. And I've heard incredible things about Maine, oddly enough. Portland in particular. The food, mostly. Food and the beer. That's generally what we fuck with when we travel. And we flew out Saturday morning, came back Sunday night. Quickest turnaround. But when I tell you, we had the best, absolute best fucking time. And honestly, it's Portland, Maine. I didn't need any more time. So, like, keep in mind also, like, think about the little destinations that, oh, it's cute, I want to check it out. But do you need a full week there?
Probably
maybe not. You know what I mean? Take advantage of the 2 days, the extra third day. If you do have an extended, like a holiday weekend coming up, President's Day about to be here. Amen. I have both presidents and whoever the other president was. It Lincoln's birthday, or was it? I think it's Lincoln's birthday is the second President Day we get. I don't know. Don't really care. I'm not going to be at work. That's what matters.
I know that's right.
Y'all can celebrate whoever y'all choose to celebrate. It's a not work day for me. Use those days to your advantage. Also, because travel is so much more than vacation. A lot of times it doesn't necessarily have to be an ornate and expansive trip, if you just need a moment to kind of clear your mind, and you know that for you, a change of scenery is going to do that, going to, say, your homegirl's house generally might be your change of scenery, and that's great for like a Tuesday wind down or like a Friday pick me up, like, woo girl, rough week, thanks for the moment. Sometimes you might just need a little weekend. Sometimes you might need a little bit of an extended time away from the normal stresses of life. And short trips, road trips, train trips are absolutely options available to you. There are also, I'm certain, tons of like shorter work trips people could tap into, like work obligations. Even if you can find a way to pitch someone in HR or whatever department is going to approve this for you, consider a non-traditional path. I didn't even consider that there would even be fellowships for bigly people, like grown, not in school people. So consider that your job just might agree to some shit you might not have considered they would agree to. If you find something that is tangentially related, pitch it. Make it sound good and give a reason why it's going to be beneficial to the organization or to the group as a whole, and give it a motherfucking shot.
I would add to...
Oh, please do.
No, yeah, I would add to... So this, like, for one of my breaks we had at work, I did like an East Coast trip. So I went Baltimore, Philly, New York. And because we had a work trip on Boston, I only paid for like the one way, because then I ended up going to Boston straight from New York. So we already had to be over there. So it was like, well, let me just plan a trip over there so that I can kind of go. So like, that's also a way to use it. If you know you have a work trip, if you do travel for work, see if you can go maybe like a little before, a little after. So maybe you'll only cover one of the flights instead of both of them. And then the other thing that actually I'm doing this year is traveling for festivals in the U.S. I think I did like a 4-month just traveling to different U.S. cities last year. And that was really fun. But this year I want to go to festivals. I think those make really good trips, because you're going for a certain point. Like if you have been to a city already, right? You may not want to go back to like New York if you only want to see like Times Square, which I hope you want to see more of New York City than Times Square. But but
I'd say don't bother, but if you make it this
right.
Here, just say
but say they have a festival you want to go to, that gives you a different reason to go to. See, like I plan on going to the Black Food Truck Festival in Charleston this year, and then they have the other one in Charlotte. And I've been to Charleston, have been to Charlotte, so like that's also a really fun trip to have. And again,
it's in Charleston this year.
The Black Food Truck Festival is in Charleston, yeah.
Because I feel like I know one of the girls that does their like their design team, and I keep seeing her post it. I'm like, oh, that would be so cute. I want to go, but then it's just like,
I know. I want to go because like
go now.
Charleston, I didn't have a good first impression when I went. So like, this is also a chance for me to go again.
Try it again.
The aura of racism in Wisconsin is strong. It was very potent in Charleston. That's how I felt
about Nashville.
Yeah.
I've been maybe 3 times at this point.
Yeah.
So doing it for me.
So I'm kind of going to be with the Black folks this time, to be more over there to see what their community, because it looks really fun on Instagram. So also I love food, so I will travel for food. So I feel like that's also another great way to kind of go out and you don't need a full week to do that. A festival is like 2 days. So it's really like a Friday, Saturday, Sunday situation. So you don't need to really take off that much work if you did like after work flight, which tend to be cheaper if you take the later ones, or like the super like red eye early ones too.
And I think that the beautiful thing about going for a festival is that it kind of forces you into more of a not organic, but more of an authentic experience of a place, and kind of allows you to kind of veer away from the traditional touristy kind of activities and destinations. You're mixing with a bunch of locals. Granted, not to say that tourists don't show up for festivals, but a festival is one of those things that is it's going to generate local buzz as well. So people are going to show up for it. It's a perfect opportunity to find out, hey, I'm staying in X, Y, and Z area. Or if I do come visit this city, where do you suggest I go? Where do the locals eat? What do the locals do? Like, I know that, let me think of a state. All right. Michigan, Detroit, It's huge. Everybody goes to Detroit if you're going to go to Michigan, but where else in Michigan would you suggest that somebody visit, right?
Mhm.
Little things like that. Use the opportunities to find out for something a longer trip might placate for you, or even just in terms of making the right connections. I keep telling y'all, talk to people when you travel. I've met some of the most incredible people just randomly. And I don't mean this, and I always say this, and I low-key wish that some of y'all knew me like personally a little bit, just to kind of understand like why I say it so frequently. Like, I'm not a people person, because I think like hosting a podcast, you would naturally just think that I'm a very talkative person. Just like, I want to run up to people in the street like, hey, how are you? Really? What's going on? Let's talk. Not me at all.
As long as you're not one of the people who like, so what do you hate about Americans? Like,
I'm not that girl.
I don't like.
Not that girl. Because I don't want to know. Because chances are we agree. Chances are I too dislike that same thing. So I'm not even going to bring it up, because of the off chance that you already think that about me. I would rather just hopefully keep you in the bubble, in the me bubble, in the D bubble. I'm who you're interacting with. I'm who you're dealing with. Let's keep it there and leave the rest of the Americans out of it. And when I tell you that I am not exactly, I'm a kind person, I'm not exactly like a nice person, if that makes sense. Like, I've heard people say the difference between New York and LA. Like, I care about people genuinely. So I'm not about wasting your fucking time. You know what I mean? Pleasant. Hey, good morning, good afternoon. I was raised well, but I'm not very much so the need to know your life story kind of thing. Just be nice. And I think that's most of what I'm trying to express to y'all, is that talking to people isn't necessarily bearing your entire soul or asking intrusive questions. It's being pleasant. Good morning. How are you? If you find the little in to laugh at something that just recently happened nearby, if you find the in to ask a question that's been, wait, so do you guys normally order coffee with every meal, or is it just like a dinner thing? Random to you, but you'd be surprised when somebody answers back. How do you know if they don't own a fucking coffee shop, right? And they say, well, yeah, we do it every meal. I actually do it as a special. Why don't you come down and check it out? My shop's right here. Stranger things happen, folks, and sometimes you might want something stranger, but not for me to decide for you. That being the case, talk to randoms.
Yeah.
I don't know about in regular life, but vacation is fun.
And it's even better too. Like, I was just in Mexico City for a little bit, and like, I speak Spanish. Traveling like to Latin America is actually one of my favorite things to do. I get to use it all the time, and the best convos I have are the one I have in Spanish. Like, it really like talking to people is beautiful. It's even more beautiful when you talk to them in their language. They're just like, oh my gosh, like, you speak Spanish. Like, that's just because unfortunately, like, a lot of tourists don't. Yeah. And so I can't do that everywhere. Okay. I only speak English, Spanish, and Ave. Those are the only 3 languages I got.
Ave.
African American vernacular English.
Oh, girl.
I speak black people. Okay.
All right, bitch. I'm bilingual too. That's in that dictionary. Go ahead.
Yeah. But I think it's also beautiful to make those connections. And I've done them through hand gestures. Like, you know, there are people who also want to learn English. So they're like, can I just hang out with you? And so that's happened too. But I think there is beauty when you're able to go somewhere else and just talk to people in like in the way that they're comfortable, right? Because they're comfortable in their own language. And so I had a lot of really great convos with Uber drivers when I was in Mexico City. They also have the best recommendations as well as security guards. And I stay in hostels, so the security guards or like the front desk people in hostels also have really great recommendations. But yeah, definitely not being afraid to talk to random people has worked well in my favor thus far. Fingers crossed, knock on wood, that continues.
And I will also suggest to add on to your taxi drivers and like front desk people. My favorite is waiters, waitresses, bartenders, because they're already talking to you. You don't need to. You're not interrupting them. You're not being a bother. You're not boring to them. Like, this is part of their bag. This is what they do. So I always go in and I ask, well, what do you recommend? What do you eat? If like I love beer, but I will always ask my waiter, waitress, or my bartender, well, do you drink IPAs? Or do you, first of all, I just ask if they drink. And then I'll ask them, all right, well, if we're talking beer, do you drink IPAs? What do you suggest? Or if we're talking cocktails, it's like, all right, well, what do you drink? You dark, you light? What are our flavors? Where am I going with this? And people like talking about themselves. So if you ask someone for their recommendation, that's the easiest in. That is one of my personal ways to get people talking. And it also, when you ask your servers and people that you have to interact with, it also keeps them from doing too much talking because they're also still at work. So if you don't want to just randomly strike up a conversation with somebody next to you when you don't know how long you'll be waiting for something, and now it's like, now you have like an attached friend, like now this person is just like, sometimes you run into the people that like really want to go in and you just wanted to be like, hey, I like those shoes, those are really cute. Oh yeah, you got them from there? Really? Okay, wow, that's really cool. That's cool.
Yeah.
Okay, we're still talking.
Yeah.
Ready to go read my book. But I like asking the people that, you know, the conversation isn't going to last forever. And if you wanted it to last forever, what's your IG? Do you have a Twitter? You can always continue that conversation, but you're not necessarily, you're not committing yourself to more than you would want to. And that's from someone who doesn't always talk to people, but does enjoy people. It's a weird thing here. Okay. It makes sense.
That's real. And too, anybody who asks you, like, I've had comments with folks who, like, I've been going to a store and they're like checking out, like, oh, like, is it your first time in X country? I'm like, yeah. It's like, oh my God, well, welcome. That's also an invitation too, sometimes, because they already are curious about like what you're doing there. You can also so do you have any recommendations? I kind of read a little bit, but I'm just interested, like, what would you like, what are things you would do, right? Or you would recommend? Here is another great way.
Where shouldn't I go? What should I avoid? I know that's one of those things that sometimes you ask for the recommendations of things to do. Sometimes asking what not to do or where not to go can also be of use. I'll never forget in Peru, my taxi driver was dropping me off and he was asking like, oh, well, what time do you want to come back? And I don't know. Well, what do you suggest? I'll be here at 5:00. You don't want to be here after dark. Sir, meet me at 4:30. Thank you for that. And then I had another driver he was Costa Rica. Peru was the guy. He was so sweet. I got a picture of him someplace. I wish I had like a way to get in contact with him. He was a real one. He was like, gave real grandpa vibes. You know what I mean? Like, take the picture for you, take a picture. I'm going to slow down, do the little U-turn so you can see the, what do you call them? The murals and stuff. And the whole time he's driving me to, I don't even know where the hell I was going. Maybe to get something to eat. He was don't go this way. When you go across this, I'm going to drop you here. But if you want to go to the other place I was telling you, don't be on your phone. Put your phone away. Go straight there. Come straight back. Then you can use your phone. But if you go this way, do not. And I'm like, yo, grandpas, thank you. You would be surprised at the information you can get by just availing yourself to kindness. That's it. And that's the point. So, Sojourner, is there anything else you would like to leave the good people with?
Don't let these jobs and your school run you, okay? People will put me under the category of overachiever, but I just think that I was not put on this earth to just stay in an office, to pay rent even. So if you can stay at home for as long as you can to save some money, like I have been doing in this pandemic, where the rent has gone here. It's been going up and down. Do it. But no, for real, I just really think that there are ways to make travel work for us. Again, it doesn't have to be elaborate. I'm going to go to a luxury villa and a safari in Kenya. Like, that is something beautiful to aspire to. I put South Africa on my list back when I was teaching English in Spain in 2016, 2017. I just went in 2022. So, like, it's great to have those dream bucket list places, but there are a lot of different ways to travel, different types of traveling you could do. And so don't get discouraged. There's a lot of world to see, a lot of world to experience. And you'll get there, right? You may not get to every single country in the world, but you're going to see some really beautiful things either in your own country, in your own city, or abroad. And when you do, it'll be a wonderful experience. for sure, because it is changed so much for me, and I've done about every type of travel you can think of, and I find beauty in all of it for sure.
That's one thing I definitely want to agree with you on, is that there's beauty in all of it, even the trips that don't go according to plan. When stuff goes wrong, things don't go your way, you miss something, you lose something, you find something, you gain something. Like everything for your favor. The universe will work in your favor. Trust your gut and take the risk.
And follow the flight deals.
And what?
And follow the flight deals, okay? If you don't have an actual bucket list, just get on a little email list. I think Scott Sheet Flights is now called Going. Get on his premium list. It's like $39 a year. Just see what those flights are looking like. They do international and domestic. If you don't have a full-on bucket list and you kind of just want to follow wherever's cheapest, that's a great list to join to kind of create your own little travel adventure too.
And as a follow-up to that, if you are unable to plan travel like far in advance due to family work limitations or whatever, you don't necessarily have to plan the trip and then accommodate your time. You can also plan a trip that accommodates for your time. Figure out when you can go someplace. A lot of people plan their trips based on where they want to go. They say, I want to go to France. And so they just spend weeks or months or days or whatever looking for the best time to go to France, where to go to France, prices, places, all that jazz, right? Not everybody has that ability, but if you do know when you will be off, what's available to you then? What is accessible to you during that window? Scott's Cheap, what is it? The new one.
It's called Going now, I think.
So Going is great when you have the time, and then you can you have more of the destination centered search, right? But if you can't necessarily go that way, I personally love Google Flights. And what was the other one I did? Skyscanner. You could put in the date and then it'll just tell you all the motherfucking flights that are available to you at that time. And you just pick what you want to spend your money on. So there are a lot of different ways for you to figure out travel for you. So you just got to tap into what method is going to work for you. So, Darcy, for me, Sojourner, thank you. Gracias.
Thank you so much.
Para su tiempo.
Gracias.
Girl, that's it. I can say hello very well. Other than that, yeah, I can understand it better than I can speak it. I ain't going to sit here and try to embarrass myself. I appreciate you for your time. Thank you so very much for joining us. I'm going to absolutely have the link, first of all, to that thread in the description box, as well as website to Sojourner. Are you open to people reaching out to you if they have any questions or looking for resources or anything in terms of travel or anything?
Yeah. So if you look up Sojourneys, you'll find me because no one else has that name as of now. But yeah, I'm at the Sojourneys on Instagram, and then TikTok, YouTube, Twitter is just at Sojourneys. I'm also, but be mindful, I'm a one-woman show. So if I don't respond to your DM right away, don't come yelling at me. I'm sorry. I have a 9-to-5 too, but yeah, feel free to DM me, and I try to check my DMs on a weekly basis just to make sure I'm answering everybody. I'm also available via email if you have a longer request at contact@sojourneys.com. If you want to talk to me more in depth, email could also be a good way to get in touch. But yeah, I'm visible. Okay, I'm not hiding. My digital footprints everywhere. So if you want to contact me, you can find me.
All right, so I'll definitely have the links to her website in the description box so that you can get to all of her channels and respectfully reach out should you have reasonable questions and concerns. All right, y'all. Fuck with y'all the next episode. Bye.
Bye.